What if I told you that King Arthur never truly existed? At least, not the way you think. The whispering grows louder, indistinct words swirling through the darkness. The candle's flame wavers, as if the air itself is listening. For centuries, the legend has been told: a noble king, chosen by fate, rising from the shadows to unite a fractured land. A hero wielding a sword of unimaginable power, ruling with wisdom and justice. But legends are like polished stones. They shine brightly on the surface, while the cracks underneath remain hidden. The massive, ancient book resting on the stone altar. The leather cover is worn, its title lost to time, its pages yellowed and fragile, as if they hold secrets not meant to be read. History is not what we remember, it is what we are allowed to believe. What if the tale of King Arthur is not a story of honor, but a carefully crafted illusion? What if his rise to power was not destiny, but manipulation? What if Camelot, the kingdom of light, was always doomed to darkness? The hooded figure steps forward, their fingers adorned with ancient rings, each engraved with strange, forgotten symbols. Slowly, almost reverently, they turn the first page of the book. Arthur, young and strong, pulling Excalibur from the stone, his knights kneeling in awe. The perfect king, the perfect ruler. But then, the page turns. Arthur, his armor cracked and bloodied, his crown slipping from his head, his face contorted in pain, the gold of Camelot stained red. Tonight, we will not tell the story of Arthur the king. We will tell the story of Arthur the man, the story that was buried, rewritten, reshaped into legend. The story of his betrayal, his sins, and the curse that followed him until his final breath. A low growl of thunder rumbles in the distance. The candle flickers, struggling against an unseen force. And then darkness, silence, a breathless pause, as if the world itself is holding still, waiting for the truth to be spoken. A grand medieval hall, cold and vast, its stone walls lined with flickering torches. Their flames stretch unnaturally high, casting long, twisted shadows. A deep, unsettling hum vibrates in the air, low, hollow, almost like voices murmuring just beyond the veil of reality. The sound is not music, it is something older, something watching. Look closely. Do you feel it? The weight of something ancient, something forgotten. This hall has witnessed more than celebrations. It has seen betrayal. It has heard the final cries of dying men. It has held the ghosts of kings who never truly rested. The shadows shift. For a moment, they seem to take shape, figures draped in armor, silent and unmoving, their empty eyes locked onto something beyond the torch's light. Some say the dead do not speak, but that is a lie. The past never stops whispering. And tonight, we will listen. A gust of wind rushes through the hall. The torches flicker violently, almost going out. The shadows vanish, and then the hum stops. Everything is still, too still, as if the hall itself is waiting for the story to begin. Let us go back to the very beginning. Before the sword, before the legend, before Arthur even knew his own name, to the night that shaped his destiny. To the night his life was stolen before he was even born. A storm brews outside the great stone walls, lightning flashing in the distance. And as the rain begins to fall, the scene shifts, pulling us into the past, into the heart of the storm, into the night that started it all. A king of honor, a just ruler, the chosen one. That's the Arthur they want you to believe in. Golden light bathes Camelot's towering castles, the banners of the round table fluttering in the wind. The perfect kingdom shining under the sun, its walls unbreakable, its ruler beloved. Knights kneel before their king, their armor polished, their swords raised in loyalty. They tell of a kingdom built on justice, of a ruler who led with wisdom and strength, a hero touched by fate, gifted with Excalibur, uniting all under his rule. For a moment, it seems real, the perfect kingdom, the perfect legend. But then, something changes. A flicker, a distortion. The golden light grows harsh, unnatural. The images begin to twist, the towers crack, the banners burn. The knights once bound by loyalty turn on each other, swords clashing in the throne room, blood pools beneath Arthur's feet. His crown slips from his head. He stands alone drenched in blood, his kingdom in ruins. But what if I told you that Arthur's kingdom was built on a lie, that the sword he pulled was never meant to be his, that his closest allies would be the ones to tear him apart? The screen flickers again, pulling us backward through time, like a thread unraveling. The perfect story burns away, the legend crumbles to dust, and now we go back to the night it all began. The golden glow disappears, replaced by darkness. A storm brews in the distance, the wind howling, the sky split open by jagged streaks of lightning. The camera moves through the storm, past the roaring sea, toward a distant castle standing against the wrath of nature. The storm rages outside, inside. The walls of the castle tremble, shadows dance against the stone as torches flicker in the wind. In the center of the chamber stands Uther Pendragon. His eyes are wild, burning with an obsession that has consumed him. Before Arthur, there was Uther Pendragon, a king not of legend, but of hunger. He was a man who wanted more power, more land, but above all, he wanted her. Across the room, Merlin watches from the shadows, silent, unreadable. Uther paces like a restless beast, gripping a goblet of wine so tightly his knuckles go white. The reflection in the liquid distorts his face, twisting it, warping it. Her name was Igraine, the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, but Igraine belonged to another, the Duke of Cornwall, a man Uther could not defeat, not in battle, not by law. And so, he turned to the one force greater than swords and crowns. He turned to magic. Uther turns to Merlin, desperation thick in his voice. Merlin warned him. He asked him, "What would you sacrifice, my king?" Uther's hands shake, his breath is ragged. He stares at his reflection again, but for a brief moment, it is not his face staring back. Something is already wrong inside him. Uther's answer came without hesitation. Everything, and Merlin was hoping he would say that. A flash of lightning, the castle trembles, the wind howls louder, as if the world itself knows what is about to happen. Igraine stands alone in her chambers. The storm outside rattles the windows, but she does not flinch. She's waiting for news from the battlefield, for the return of her husband, the Duke of Cornwall. Then she hears it. The door creaks open. Heavy footsteps. A shadow moves behind her. Her husband had gone to war. He was miles away, and yet, here he was. She turns, and for a moment, relief floods her face. But then, she looks closer, and something is wrong. His eyes are wrong, cold, hollow, like a mask with nothing behind it. The torches flicker. Their light catches the polished silver mirror beside her. And in the reflection she does not see her husband. She sees something else. Something not fully human. Uther had taken what he wanted. But magic is never perfect. The spell wavered. For just a moment, the illusion cracked, and Igraine saw the truth. Her breath catches. Her body goes rigid. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But it was too late. Morning. The storm has passed. The castle is silent, but the air is thick to thick with something unspoken. Igraine wakes, her body stiff, her mind clouded. She turns. The bed beside her is empty. The door is ajar. A strange sense of dread washes over her. Something is off. Then, the sound of hurried footsteps. The door bursts open. Servants rush in, their faces pale, their hands shaking. And then, she heard the words that shattered her world. A servant kneels before her, voice trembling. "My lady, the Duke, he's dead." Igraine stares at them, unblinking, killed in battle. Last night, her breath stops, her hand trembles as it instinctively moves to her stomach. The realization crashed over her like a wave of ice. The child growing inside her was not her husband's. From the shadows, Merlin watches, his expression unreadable, but deep within his eyes, for just a moment, there is something that almost looks like regret. Months pass. Igraine no longer fights. She no longer speaks of what happened. She watches from the balcony as Uther, her new husband, sits upon his stolen throne. But there is something in the air. A feeling of unease, a sense of something unfinished. Then, on a night without stars, Merlin returns. He had come for the child born of deception, born of magic, born of a curse. Igraine does not resist. She only whispers, as if the words are not her own, but something placed inside her by fate itself. Take him. Take him far from here. He was born in darkness. He will die in darkness. Merlin nods. He lifts the child, tiny, fragile, unaware of the fate that awaits him. As he turns to leave, his expression shifts. For just a moment, there is fear in his eyes. Arthur's small hand clenches into a fist. Outside, the wind rises. The storm, which had long passed, seems to whisper again his name, carried through the night. They called it fate. They called it destiny. But was it? Or was Arthur just a pawn in a story written long before he was even born? The scene shifts. Rolling hills stretch under the golden sky. A boy runs barefoot through the fields, his laughter carried by the wind. He's not a prince. He does not know of thrones, of kingdoms, of war. He's simply Arthur, just Arthur, raised as the son of a noble knight, Sir Ector. He did not know the truth of his blood. He did not know that his life was a lie. The boy grows into a young man, strong, fast, restless. He trains every morning, sword in hand, but there is something in his eyes, something wild, something untamed. He fights, but he does not know what he is fighting for. He dreams of something more, though he does not yet understand why. But destiny does not wait for understanding. And one day, it found him a tournament, a gathering of noble lords and their sons. Arthur, unnoticed among the squires, watches as knights clash in brutal combat. Then, disaster strikes his foster brother. Sir Kay is set to fight, but his sword is missing. Panic, desperation. Arthur, eager to help, runs through the town, searching for a replacement weapon. His feet carry him to a quiet place, a forgotten place, a clearing where the wind stills, where the birds do not sing. And there, half buried in stone, stands a sword. The sword was waiting for hands that did not yet know the weight they would carry. Without thought, without hesitation, Arthur grasps the hilt. He pulls, and the world changes. The crowd gathers, gasps fill the air, whispers turn into roars. Lords and knights stare in disbelief, some in awe, others in fear. They called it a miracle, a sign, but not everyone believed. Not everyone wanted this nameless boy to be king. In the shadows, men watch, eyes narrow, fists tighten. The whispers turn venomous. A bastard child, a trick, a mistake, but the sword does not lie. And so, Arthur is crowned not by birth, not by blood, but by the will of a blade. He did not understand. Camelot was not built in a day. It was built in blood, in fire, in the cries of men who did not believe in their king. The early years were war, rebellions, challenges. The nobles who had once ruled unchecked refused to kneel. Arthur, young but unyielding, fought for his throne. He fought for a kingdom that did not yet exist. And one by one, he won. Castles fell, lords swore fealty. The land, once divided, slowly began to heal. But a kingdom ruled by one man is doomed to fail. And so, Arthur did something no king before him had dared to do. A great hall is built, a table, unlike any other, placed at its center, no head, no foot. A circle. At the round table, all men were equal. No lord was greater than another. No knight bowed lower than his brother. It was a symbol of unity, a symbol of trust. The greatest warriors of the land came to him. Brave men, honorable men, and among them, Lancelot. Lancelot the knight who would be his greatest champion. The knight who would save his life in battle. The knight who would destroy him, but for now, all is well. Camelot thrives. The kingdom flourishes. The people sing Arthur's name, and then she arrives. Guinevere, the queen, the love. The curse, she is beautiful, wise, strong-willed. The perfect queen. Arthur loves her. The kingdom loves her. But there is one who loves her in a way he should not. And he is not the king. Lancelot was Arthur's closest friend, his greatest warrior, his most trusted knight. But trust is a fragile thing. It begins with glances, a second too long. A breath held between words. In the great hall, Lancelot stands beside the queen. Their hands brush, neither moves away, neither speaks of it. In the courtyard, he helps her onto her horse. His hands linger at her waist. She does not pull back. She does not speak of it. It was nothing. It was everything. It was the beginning. The hidden moments stretch into stolen ones. A meeting in the gardens at dusk, a whisper exchanged in the echoing halls. A candle burning in a window late into the night. They do not touch. Not yet, but the air between them is charged, thick, with something unspoken. Arthur did not see. He could not see. He loved them both too much to ever believe they could betray him. But the whispers begin. The knights are not blind. They see the way Lancelot's eyes follow the queen. They see the way her lips part when he enters the room. They see, and they talk. Arthur laughs at first, dismisses it. Impossible, he says. Lancelot is his brother. Guinevere is his heart. They would never. But doubt is a poison, and once it enters the mind, it does not leave. The first time Arthur watches them too closely, he sees it. The way Lancelot stands too near, the way Guinevere's breath catches before she speaks, and something inside him shifts, something cold, something sharp. He does not ask her. He does not ask him. He cannot bear to hear the answer. But one night, it happens. The queen's chambers. The door, left open just an inch. A mistake. A temptation. A curse. Arthur does not mean to look. He does not want to see. But the shadows move, and in that sliver of space, he sees them. Lancelot, standing too close. Guinevere, her hands trembling. As she reaches for him, Arthur steps back. His heart pounds. His mind screams. He wants to believe it is a trick of the light, a cruel joke, but deep down, he knows. He has always known, and yet he says nothing. He turns away, because the truth is unbearable. Because if he speaks it, it becomes real. The betrayal has begun, and it will not end until Camelot burns. Every king has enemies. Some hide in the shadows, some wear armor, some sit at the very table meant for loyalty. But Arthur's most dangerous enemy was none of these. She did not wear a sword at her hip. She did not challenge him in the open. No, she waited. She watched. She poisoned his kingdom not with steel, but with whispers. Her name was Morgana. The scene shifts, a castle bathed in twilight. The wind howls through the towers, rattling the glass of a tall, narrow window. A woman stands there, draped in dark robes. Her eyes are sharp, cold. She watches Camelot from afar. She does not smile. She does not move, but she waits, always waiting. Arthur's half-sister. A daughter of royal blood, but never a queen. A woman born with power, but never allowed to rule. A sorceress, feared and cast aside. But Morgana never forgot. She never forgave. To the world, Arthur was the rightful king. But to her, he was the great mistake, and she would undo him. The camera moves through her chamber, scrolls unrolled across the table, ink-stained fingers drawing symbols into the candlelit air. The flames flicker, growing blue, unnatural. The shadows twist, and then she speaks. They say she whispered to the darkness itself. calling forth an ancient curse. They say she spoke to the spirits of the old gods, asking them a single question: how does a great king fall? The fire dims, the shadows swell, and a single word echoes back, carried by the wind, curling around the room, a ghost, blood. And so Morgana waited, not for war, not for battle, but for a child. The scene shifts, a prophecy, spoken in secret halls, heard only by those who would dare to listen. A child born of Arthur's own flesh would be his doom. His own blood would rise against him. His kingdom would not be lost to invaders, nor to traitors, but to his own son. The flickering flames reflect in Morgana's eyes. She already knows the truth. The child will come. But how? That is where the stories begin to twist. Some say Morgana used magic to seduce Arthur, disguised as another, tricking him into fathering the very son who would destroy him. Others say she did not need to, that she raised the boy Mordred not as a son of Arthur, but as a weapon. Either way, the result would be the same: a child raised not in love, but in hate. A boy trained not to serve, but to strike. A son destined to kill his own father. The years pass, Mordred grows. The boy becomes a warrior, his hands quick with a blade, his heart cold. He listens to the stories of Arthur's kingdom, of his throne, of his mistakes, and Morgana's whispers guide him. She feeds him anger, and anger becomes purpose. Purpose becomes prophecy, and prophecy becomes death. Arthur had won many battles, but his greatest enemy had not yet arrived. His past was coming for him, and this time he would not be able to stop it. Camelot was strong once. The knights of the Round Table were unbreakable. The kingdom had stood against enemies from all sides and survived. But kingdoms do not fall in war, they fall from within. Arthur had built his legacy on trust, and now that trust was gone. The scene shifts, the great hall filled with tension. The knights, once brothers, stand on opposite sides. Voices rise. Accusations fill the air. It began with a betrayal, the kind that cannot be forgiven, the kind that cannot be undone. Lancelot and Guinevere. Arthur sits at the head of the table, silent, unmoving. His face is unreadable, but his hands tremble. The whispers had turned to truth, and now there is no looking away. Some say Arthur was furious, that he called for Lancelot's head. Others say he was silent, that the pain was too great for words, that he simply stopped speaking. The knights argue. Some demand justice, others beg for mercy. But the air has changed. The bond between them has cracked, and through the cracks, something worse begins to seep in. Arthur could not save his marriage, but he still had his kingdom, or so he thought. Outside the castle walls, something stirs. A new enemy, not from distant lands, but from within. The betrayal of Lancelot and Guinevere was only the first thread to unravel. There were others, waiting: Morgana, Mordred, the knights who had begun to doubt their king. And then the Round Table breaks. Knights who had sworn loyalty now raised swords against each other. Old alliances shattered. Some followed Arthur, some followed Lancelot, others simply walked away. The greatest kingdom ever built was dying before their eyes, and there was nothing Arthur could do to stop it. The castle, once alive with music and celebration, now echoes with silence. Arthur sits alone in the throne room, the weight of his crown heavier than ever. He once ruled with certainty. Now, doubt is all that remains. And then came the choice that would define history. The choice that no story can agree upon. What would Arthur do with his queen? Different versions of the story begin to play out. One where Guinevere is put on trial, accused of treason. One where she is burned at the stake. One where Arthur, unable to bear the thought, sends her away, banishing her from Camelot forever. Some say she died alone in a convent, spending her final years in prayer. Others say Lancelot rescued her, that they disappeared together into the wild, and some Some say Arthur forgave her, that despite everything, he could not bring himself to hate her. But in every version, one thing remains the same: Guinevere is gone. And so is the Arthur who once believed in love. The king who remains is something else, something colder, something preparing for war. And Morgana watches. She watches as Arthur's kingdom crumbles. She watches as his heart turns to stone. She does not need to strike him down herself. She only needs to wait, because soon Mordred will come. And when he does, Arthur will face the one enemy he cannot kill, his own blood. The screen darkens. The wind howls through the empty halls of Camelot. And in the distance, thunder rumbles. The final storm is coming. Once, Arthur fought to build a kingdom. Now, he fights to keep it from crumbling into dust. But fate does not bargain. The past does not forgive. And prophecy does not break. The wind howls across a barren field. The ground is dry, cracked from months of tension, of waiting. The sky is heavy, swollen with clouds that do not yet release their rain. The land itself seems to know this is the end. The battle had been coming 4 years, whispered of in dark halls, carved into the bones of ancient prophecies. Arthur's kingdom was already wounded, bleeding from betrayal, from war, from the sins of the past. And now, the final wound would be struck. The scene shifts. A vast battlefield stretches before Camelot. At its center, two armies face each other, one led by Arthur, the other by Mordred. The silence between them is deafening. A silence before the storm. A silence before history is made. Mordred, the son, the betrayer, the prophecy fulfilled. Arthur had fought many enemies, but none like this, none whose blood ran the same as his. None who looked at him with the hatred of a stranger, but with the rage of a son who had never been claimed. Across the battlefield, Mordred sits astride his horse, his armor black as night, his banner snapping in the wind. His eyes do not waver. His hand does not shake. He's ready. To Mordred, Arthur was no king, no legend, no hero. He was a thief, a liar, a man who took everything that should have been his. The horns sound. The ground trembles as men charge. A storm of swords, of screams, of steel clashing against steel. Blood splashes against the earth. The Battle of Camelot has begun. Arthur moves through the battlefield like a man possessed. His sword finds its mark, cutting through armor, through flesh. But this is not the Arthur of old. His steps are slower. His strength is not what it once was. And for the first time, doubt grips his heart. Nights fall. Friends who once sat at the round table now lie broken in the mud. The golden kingdom that Arthur built is reduced to blood and ruin. And then, through the chaos, he sees him, Mordred, waiting, watching, his sword drawn, and moving, as if he had always known it would come to this, as if he had been waiting for Arthur all his life. This was never about the kingdom, never about the war. It was always about this moment, this fight, this reckoning between father and son. Arthur steps forward. Mordred mirrors him. The world fades. The battle, the dying screams, none of it matters now. Only this, the duel. They charge. Their swords clash. Arthur is stronger, but Mordred is faster. Youth against experience. Fire against wisdom. Their blades flash like lightning. Their movements like echoes of something that had already been decided long ago. But fate is cruel, and prophecy does not bend. For a moment, Arthur sees an opening. He moves his sword, finding flesh, piercing through Mordred's armor. A fatal strike. Mordred gasps, his eyes wide, his lips parting as if to speak. But then a final, desperate thrust. Mordred's blade, still in his grip, finds its mark. A sharp pain, a cold, sinking realization. Arthur looks down. The sword buried deep in his body. Mordred's last act, his final defiance, the prophecy. Fulfilled, Mordred is the first to fall. His body slumps to the ground, his breath leaving him. But Arthur remains standing, For a moment, his grip weakens. Excalibur slips from his fingers, he stumbles. The battlefield around him fades, the sound of battle growing distant, like echoes in a faraway dream. The knights who remain rush to his side. Sir Bedivere, Sir Gawain. They kneel beside him, but Arthur's eyes are elsewhere, watching the sky, watching the heavy clouds that still refuse to rain, watching the end of his kingdom unfold before him. The once great Camelot, now nothing but ruin. His kingdom shattered, his friends lost, his story ending, a hand on his shoulder. Sir Bedivere leans close, whispering words he cannot hear. Arthur tries to speak, but the effort is too great. The world is slipping away, his body is cold. His time is done, and so they carry him. Away from the battlefield, away from the death and the ruin. They take him to the water's edge, where the mists roll thick over the lake. The boat waits. A vessel shrouded in mist, its passengers unseen. A queen stands at its helm, Morgan Le Fay. Not an enemy now, not a sister of hatred, but something else, something older, something knowing. Arthur does not fight. He does not resist. His time is over, and so he's taken. Across the waters of Avalon, the knights watch as the boat drifts into the mist, growing fainter, smaller, until it disappears completely. And then, silence. Nothing but the lapping of the water, the whispering of the wind. The king is gone, and so Arthur was lost, or was he? The stories do not agree. Some say he died that night, his body buried in the sacred grounds of Avalon. Some say he sleeps, waiting for a time when his people will need him again, waiting for the moment to return. The legends grow, the tales spread. Arthur becomes more than a man, he becomes myth. His name is spoken in hushed reverence, in stories told to children, in songs carried through the ages. The once and future king. But was he truly a hero? Or was he simply a man, lost in a fate too great for him to escape? A man burdened by prophecy, by betrayal, by the weight of a kingdom that was never meant to last. The camera lingers on the empty throne of Camelot, dust settling over it, the echoes of the past still lingering in its walls. Perhaps Arthur was not chosen. Perhaps he was not fated for greatness. Perhaps he was simply a man who tried and failed. Or perhaps he's still waiting. The mist rolls over Avalon once more, and for just a moment, a shadow moves in the fog. A figure unseen, a presence watching, a whisper in the wind. He will return. The screen fades to black, silence. And then, the final words appear on the screen. Was Arthur a hero, or a man cursed by fate? The truth may be lost to time, but the legend will never die. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and you want more thrilling tales of mystery, history, and legend, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story, because the past is filled with secrets waiting to be told. And now, tell us in the comments what part of King Arthur's dark truth surprised you the most. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep watching, keep questioning, and remember, some legends never die.